premiere.
Oh, huh. Wonder what this is going to be. Well then, that's pretty good. Hey guys, Engineot here, and welcome to the first episode of Visceral Attack, a new series that's focused on trying to get you information and get it to you quick. If you're like me, Dark Souls 3's trailer announcement was actually no surprise. In fact, the most surprising thing was it was announced at Microsoft's press conference, but that's beside the point. Other than the leak that we got, and all the information we received upon the actual announcement, it's really hard to actually form solid conjecture about Dark Souls 3, and we're going to talk about why. Probably the biggest thing that I have to say before we go any further is that this is, again, all an opinion. You can have your own opinions. I'm not telling you don't formulate lore theories by yourself. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying be wary, because things are going to change going forward. So our Dark Souls 3 knowledge comes from a couple sources. It comes from the Nose leak, which is semi-trustworthy. The images are trustworthy, but the actual material that they gave us, like the text stuff, that's very dubious. And then we have the actual Dark Souls 3 announcement, which is much more substantive, and we have interviews with Miyazaki and all these lore details that are very specific. So let's go forward with this and approach it from two angles. We have the unconfirmed no screenshots, and then we have the actual details that were reported on by community members and websites and all these other sources. So it's my opinion that Dark Souls 3 trailer is actually super misleading, and it's done that way on purpose. You have all this kind of imagery that's going to be very similar. You have crowns in it, you have giants in it, you have all this stuff that we're supposed to recognize and be like, aha, it is a continuation from Dark Souls 2. Same with Anor Londo. You know, we've had plenty of people who go through and they match up pictures of Anor Londo in the trailer of Dark Souls 1 and the intro of Dark Souls 1 and all this stuff. And it does match, yes. So we also have this image of a giant that was posted on Reddit where people have found, you know, one of the Anor Londo giants. Awesome. Really cool. All that stuff is really fantastic. But we need to actually consider that we're being kind of purposely shaped. Miyazaki is a known kind of purveyor of this type of style, where he like leads you on to believing something and then it's either completely not true or you never find out the answer. He does this a lot. In fact, all of Dark Souls is basically about that. So we have to consider that we are being potentially a bit messed with by him when we look at this trailer. That's not to say that we're going to have like a Dark Souls 2 situation on our hands where like the trailer that was first released is like in no way reflective of the actual game. That was something that happened and was completely caused by internal development problems. But Dark Souls 3 has been going on a long time. You know, they've shaped this trailer. It's what they want to show pretty much, and I'm confident in that. But we have to consider, you know, the side of, well, if they're playing with our expectations, as Miyazaki likes to do, he's not quite a Kojima in that way, but he's getting there. Then what is he actually trying to, you know, point out with this trailer? Or is this trailer supposed to be just a taste of something rather than all of these lore clues? You know, the biggest lore clue, for example, that we have is the name Lord of Cinder. That's the big one. Lord of Cinder, of course, is a tie back to Gwyn from Dark Souls 1, and there are multiple Lords of Cinder, which is a possible kind of callback to Dark Souls 2's cyclical kind of system that affected how the game was made, where Dark Souls 1 set up this precedent of here's this fantasy world, choose light or dark, done, and Dark Souls 2 set up this cycle, and the cycle is the one that is a little bit dubious that a lot of people are very divisive about. They don't like it, or they really like it, or vice versa. And so this cycle is going to be interesting because if Miyazaki does what I think he's doing, he's not going to be retconning Dark Souls 2. And a lot of people really want Dark Souls 2 retconned, and, you know, eventually I'll make a video about why Dark Souls 2 isn't as bad as everyone wants to believe it's bad. But Dark Souls 2 is not getting retconned, and the coolest thing about all this promotional material that we're seeing is kind of like this symbolic, like melding of two armors. So if you look at the armor set in the Dark Souls 3 release materials, like this kind of like melted Red Knight stuff, it's a really cool mix between the Elite Knight set and the Alva set. It's like they're taking two sides of Dark Souls 1 and 2, and they're kind of symbolically melting them together in front of us. And that's awesome, and I hope that Miyazaki can really make the best of this opportunity to kind of make Dark Souls 2 more relevant in a space where Dark Souls 2 doesn't feel very relevant for various reasons. And I'll get into that at some other video. But all the stuff that I've just said, like all of the conjecture that I've made about the lore in passing, completely unconfirmed. Completely. Like, we have no idea. And it's basically, you know, I'm kind of grasping at straws just like everybody else, but this is kind of the danger that I'm talking about. You know, when we watch this trailer, you know, there's a lot of environment happening. There's a lot of, you know, telling like what is this world is going to be, like only embers remain, all these quotes. Like, it's basically just giving us a glimpse of what Dark Souls 3 is about. You know, we have the Lord of Cinder coming back. That was confirmed by Miyazaki as he rises up. You know, we have this kind of, you know, desolate landscapes and really sad looking people. And then we have this girl putting on this magical swirling crown. You know, we have all this stuff that is meant to be attempted to be interpreted. Like, it's all like, you know, imagine Miyazaki, you know, laid out, you know, a bunch of tea leaves in front of you and said, what do you see? Like, that's kind of where we're at right now with this, because we just don't have enough context. So as much as I love speculating and hearing all these theories, what's going to be way more interesting is when we get more details and when the game actually announces and we get to put that together. That's going to be the best part. And, you know, the best part of any Souls game launch, to me at least, is seeing how people like put together lore in their own ways and seeing how people construct things and seeing how the community figures out the game as a group. That's the exciting part. So all the speculation stuff, I love it. It's really cool. I like seeing what they're going to do. And I think it's more symbolic, though, than what we're going to be actually seeing necessarily. Like, you know how Dark Souls 1's like opening introduction cinematic, like it didn't really have a lot to do with any gameplay stuff. Like, there was no gameplay stuff in that trailer whatsoever. It's with, unless you want to say Gwyn, you know, where he made an appearance. Like, that's gameplay arguably. But when we look at Dark Souls 3's trailer, you know, we have to kind of make this call where we're like, is this going to be indicative of the game that we're playing, or is it indicative of the environment we'll be in more than that? And I'm pretty sure it's the latter. It's going to be about the environment as opposed to being about what the gameplay is. And the gameplay is going to speak for itself, which is awesome. Like, that's kind of how it should be. And in a day where we have this kind of pre-rendered trailer fatigue, it was nice to see a trailer that gives us like a weird kind of disconnected lore context as opposed to some stylish, flashy thing. Like, you know, Demon Souls opening cinematic, for example, was that. And they've moved away from that for the better, I want to say. So my point is there's a ton of different ways to interpret this trailer. You know, Dark Souls 3 is going to be a huge game for all of us who are watching this video and people who really like the Souls series. That's a given. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this trailer probably 2 years from now and be like, man, that was either way off the mark or it had a ton of clues. It's going to be either one of the two, where we either feel it's off the mark because the game we played was really different than the trailer that we got, like in Dark Souls 2, which I don't think will be the case. Or we can go back and say like, wow, you know, if only we knew what we knew now, you know, when we went back and watched that trailer. Like, we're going to go on and say like, wow, you know, it was amazing how much they actually crammed into that trailer that was important that we just didn't have the context to interpret just yet. And I think that's going to be how it is. Moreover, you know, a lot of the trailer I feel like is this symbolic blending of Dark Souls 1 and 2. And I feel like, you know, having read a lot of these interviews with like Tanemura and with Miyazaki, I feel like that team, when Dark Souls 2 happened, you know, Dark Souls 2 was a pretty rough game internally. And if you look into like, you know, actual interviews with Tanemura and hear what happened with Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 2, the reason it's so janky and disconnected, and I'll make a whole video about this later on, is that they had created all of these assets under a different director than Tanemura, and then the game changed hands because From had this big internal restructuring. The game wasn't shaping up to what it needed to be. There was this disastrous Edge interview where they called the game casual or something, and, you know, it got out of hand. And then from there, they had to kind of do this cleanup where they were like, well, shoot, we need to make this like a real good Dark Souls game. And it's not shaping up to be what we think that is. So Tanemura stepped in and fixed it. And I feel like he didn't, you know, fix it all the way, but he did a damn fine job. And I think he deserves more credit. But Miyazaki, I hope, sees that. And he sees this opportunity, in my opinion, based on this limitless conjecture that I'm going to tell you. But he makes this game about, I feel like, a symbolic blending of Dark Souls 1 and 2. And I feel like you're going to see, you know, elements of Dark Souls 1 and 2 merge and combine in ways that are very creative, very meaningful, and hopefully very relevant to our understanding of both games in retrospect. And if he pulls it off, and again, all this is conjecture, just like I told you not to do in the beginning of this video, it's all going to be really cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing more, and I hope you are too. So anyway, guys, this was Enjanaut. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have comments or theories or stuff you want to share, leave them at the bottom and I'll do my best to reply to you ASAP. Thanks, and have a good one.